Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Career Webinar Service Series today. We are producing this series in partnership with Illinois Tech. Our career fair that was supposed to be scheduled for today, April 1st, has been moved. We will be offering that on-site, in-person career fair at Herman Hall on their Mies campus on November 4th currently. You can visit the Chicagoland Food and Beverage website, which is at www.chicagolandfood.org in order to pre-register for that with a free student registration. You are also welcome to, at that time, create a student profile for yourself. Student profiles have the ability to submit your basic contact information and upload a resume. We will be creating a database of those resume submissions and sharing those with industry representatives throughout the next few months who are doing hiring for jobs and internships over the late spring and summer season leading up to the fall career fair. So for today, we did create a series of webinars that is based on information sharing. We asked some of our favorite experts from around the Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network to create about 20 minutes of content that just shares information that you can use about choosing a career path in food and beverage, useful interview or networking tips, hot jobs in food and beverage right now, and other resources. All of the webinars from today are being recorded, and we will share the recordings, decks, and any other resources that the presenters make available on our website. We are creating a COVID-19 resource page, and the webinars post will be posted in that area. If you have any questions, you of course can reach out to us at info@chicagolandfood.org, and please do not hesitate to ask if you have any trouble finding resources. Without further ado, we will turn it over for our next webinar series, and please feel free during the course of the webinar to submit questions either during the Q&A feature, which is at the base of your screen, or the chat feature. We will provide those to the host or to the speaker at the end of today's presentation. So thank you again and enjoy the presentation.
In-person career fair, so this is a good start to preparing for the November 4th event. And I want to thank Andrea and Armand Paradise from Illinois Tech. Together, these two have led a team to put on today's program. And all the students from Illinois Tech and other universities will get, I think, a tremendous boost out of today's speakers. As I understand, I'm really excited to hear that students are going to learn about, making the best resumes, but also how to network and what the potential career paths are in the food industry, as well as some current jobs and internships. So I think it's just going to be a fabulous day, and I want to congratulate everyone who's been involved in putting this together. And students, have a great time. Learn as much as you can. I'll turn it back over to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the support of Illinois Tech in the design of all of these, and certainly your support and site providing for the big career fair that we're looking forward to in the fall. So thank you again. Well, without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Laurie Hyllberg from Kinsa. Kinsa is a long-term member of CFBN. They have been extremely supportive of all of our job outreach efforts and helped us to actually build the job database that everyone will hopefully be interacting with over the next few months. So thank you so much, Laurie, and we are looking forward to everything you have to share.
Excellent, and thanks for having me. I want to make sure you can see my screen. Can you hear me and see my screen?
We can hear you and still see you. We do not have your screen share yet.
Okay, so let me back it up. That was one. And give me 1 second here. I will do that now. Okay. So this should now be showing you my screen.
Yes, we can see the job site.
Okay. All right. So I'm actually going to be sharing, clicking back to the job site at the end of our presentation today. Can you see my tips for today's food and beverage industry job seeker? Perfect. Okay. So as Andrea had said, Kinsa Group has been partnering with Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network for a number of years now, and we enjoy that partnership. I have been with Kinsa Group since 1999, so I celebrated 20 years with Kinsa Group, and we recruit exclusively for food and beverage companies across the U.S. from our headquarters in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin metro area. I happen to be just over the border in Kenosha, Wisconsin, so a part of the Greaterland, Chicagoland area as well. And I appreciate you taking some time today to learn a little bit more about how you can develop your career in the food industry. Kinsa Group has been recruiting in this industry for 35 years, since 1985 when we were founded. And actually in 2018, we were awarded a Forbes Best Professional Recruiting Firm. So hopefully you'll take some of these tips and some of the resources I provide at the end of the presentation with you throughout your career. And you can certainly look back to them if there's any information that I'm sharing that you can't get it written down fast enough. I will include a lot of information at the end. So one of the main things that I would say as a entrant into the food industry, either as a student that's going to be graduating soon or has recently graduated, or you just started your career in the food industry, is to consider that you need to be in the driver's seat of your career rather than just going along for the ride. Your long-term career success is really up to you. So I'm going to share some tips today for how to remain in the driver's seat and really focus on being in control of that. A couple of things that you're going to want to do up front, now would be an ideal time if you've got some time on your hands, is really identify your goals for your career in the food industry. You may have gone to school and gotten a major that kind of set you up well for being in the food industry, but I really would be helpful at this point in your career, or as you're starting your career, is to write down some of those goals, what your ideal position is, what type of companies you'd like to work for throughout your career, what are some of the accomplishments that you would like to have when you look back at your career, when you're edging towards retirement someday. What are some of those things that you would like to have accomplished? And really use this as a roadmap to gauge your career throughout its span. The next thing I would encourage you to do to be in the driver's seat of your career is to maximize every opportunity that you have to learn. If you're in school right now, really take advantage of the counselors, the professors, the internships, individuals, classmates around you that are sharing information that can help you to develop yourself and your knowledge base, exposure to different areas within the food industry. It's a great time to really take advantage of that. Then the other thing is, if you're already well into your career and your employer provides you with opportunities to expand your knowledge by attending seminars or sessions like this, take advantage of those opportunities to learn. And then along with that, continually develop your network. When you are at learning events, be sure to speak up. Share your contact information, whether that's a business card or something like that, with the individuals you're meeting with, and develop your network of professionals that you know in various sectors of the food industry. This will always be helpful for you in the long run for your long-term career success. Because you never know what you might be able to offer them as a resource, or what they might be able to offer you as a resource in the future. The next thing I would encourage you to do for being in the driver's seat of your career is to evaluate the position that you're working in periodically. And if you've got the feeling that it's a little bit stagnant, you're not growing, you're not developing, your position is not taking you towards your career goals, to consider changing jobs before you stagnate, before you've been sitting in that role too long, and having those negative feelings about the position, the company, or yourself. So really kind of continuing evaluating the role that you're in and where you want to be. In order to do that, you're going to really need to plan some career management time. And this is something good to set on your calendar to do annually or a couple of times a year. A lot of people do this around New Year's resolution time. You take that last week of December between Christmas and New Year's, and you take stock of where you're at with your long-term career goals and what your current career looks like and where you want to be in the upcoming year. Another good time to do this is right before or right after a performance review with your manager. Before you go into that performance review, evaluating where you're at, what you've accomplished in the past 6 or 12 months, and sharing that information with your manager so that you set yourself up for that next opportunity. That's a good time to, really take stock of where you're at in your career and where you want to be. The reason I say these things and keep them on your radar is that successful careers are proactively managed. They don't just happen by accident. You want to be in control of where your career is going. So as you're starting out, one of the things we said we were going to do in this webinar today is give you some ideas and tips about resumes. You're definitely going to have a lot of resources online for how to write a resume, how to format a resume. So I am going to provide some extra tips in addition to the basic format that you might be able to find online for your resume. Clearly, your resume needs to have your name at the top and some key details. So among those key details at the top of your resume, you're going to want to include contact information that's appropriate for this potential future employer to reach you. That should be your mobile phone number, ideally, so that people can text and or call you to get information your way. You're also going to want to include your email address, and a personal email address is recommended. If you're currently employed, you don't really want to use your employer's email address, your work email address. You're going to want to use a personal email address. Perhaps consider setting up a special email address just for your employment and job search information. I have a picture of a home at the top of this slide just to suggest to you it's really important that you put your location on your resume. You don't need to include your actual street address, but including your city and state and ideally your zip code is going to help employers to find you if you share your resume online. A lot of search engines search for professionals based on their distance from a job opportunity. So whether you're 20 miles or 50 miles or 100 miles from the employer, that's when they're going to recommend you, and they can't find that information unless you've included your zip code. So I would encourage you in your contact information to include your city, your state, and your zip code. In addition to that, it's always good to include a link to your social media profile that you use for professional business purposes, like a LinkedIn account. You can include that as well. Your experience and your education should also be very visible on your resume. That education should include the degree you achieved, the major, the university that you achieved it from, and your graduation date, if at all possible. The reason I encourage you to include a graduation date is it specifies that you did in fact achieve the degree. You're not still going to school for that degree or that education. With your experience, you're going to want to include the employer that you're working for, and this may be internships, this may be employment that you did while you were in school, and you're going to want to include that employer name, your position title there, and some of the key skills that you obtained while working there as bullet points. So kind of getting into the next section here. with that employer, you're going to want to include a brief description of what that employer does. What are their products? What is their main contribution to the marketplace? You don't want to assume that every recruiter or hiring manager or employer that's reading your resume knows exactly who that employer is and what they do. There are some major brands out there in the food industry that people may assume they know what the products were for that company, but even then, there's often large food and beverage industry conglomerates that the average person may not know all the products in their portfolio. So I encourage you, right under the employer and your job title, to do a very brief description of what the company does and some of their products. Next, in a resume, you don't want it to be heavy text. You definitely want it to call out key accomplishments, key responsibilities in bullets below your employer and job title. You're going to also want to use numbers to quantify your skills, your expertise, what you may have accomplished. I gave some examples here. That might include, if you're a manager that's been in the industry for a while, you might want to include the size of the team that you've managed, some of those job titles, the budget responsibility you had for that company, that employer, maybe the revenue you generated if you're in a sales or business development position. If you're in a regulatory or technical position, including information about the audit scores that you got. Whatever information is available for public knowledge, not confidential, that you can put a metric on, it's great to share that type of specifics on your resume. And then one of the last things you want to do is proofread your resume for grammatical accuracy, not just using a spell check. It seems like this might be obvious, but I would have someone else do it for you as well. Just have them take a look at it and make sure you've used the proper grammar on your resume, because sometimes that can send a red flag, lack of attention to detail, if you've got something in error on your resume. So a couple of things I wanted to share what not to do on your resume as well. Avoid these things. Avoid being too generic with your responsibilities on the positions that you held. This is important to be able to call yourself out. What's different about you? Why would an employer want to hire you instead of someone else's resume right next to yours? The more specific accomplishments you can provide and the skills that you developed, that's going to help you to get a leg up on the next candidate. The other thing is making sure that there's consistency in the dates on your resume, your education, your employment history. If there's overlap, there should be an explanation for that. Otherwise, they're going to assume that things should happen chronologically, and you just want to double check that you have the right month and year listed on your resume. Sometimes we see errors on this where someone will accidentally put the wrong year. It's just something to check back over. And then another thing, if you're further along in your career, this is something to be paying attention to with your career goals, but make sure that your career shows job progression, career progression throughout your experience. Things on a resume that are red flags for an employer is a lack of upward job progression as you're growing in your career. This is something just to pay attention to as you're managing and in the driver's seat of your own career. Now, this might take the form of growing in your current employer cross-functionally and getting some experience with a different aspect of the business or a different product line to grow your knowledge, but at least showing growth is what's going to be important on the resume. In addition to your resume, I did want to give some things to pay attention to or have prepared when you're looking for a new position. You're going to want to take advantage of the opportunity to add a cover letter. This doesn't always have to be a separate Word document, piece of paper. It may be your cover email. It may be the introduction that you send, on the application form that goes along with your resume on someone's website. But this is your opportunity to customize your skills for the job that you're applying for, or for the employer that you're applying to. You don't always have to update everything on your resume every time you apply to a new job, but definitely take the opportunity in your cover email introduction to stand out from the crowd by highlighting what skills you've developed and what energy you bring to that employer would set you apart and make you a good fit for their organization. The next thing I would say is have some references ready, individuals who have observed your work ethic, your responsibilities in the past, and can speak to your ability to be successful in a position like this. Usually it's a former boss. I would have at least 2 or 3 of those prepared in advance and let them know that you're going to be using their name and phone number when you get close to an acceptance of a position. The next thing to be aware of in addition to your resume is your online presence. More and more employers are going to be looking for your name and your person online, and you want to make sure that what you have put out about yourself online is how you want to be represented and authentic to who you are, and does it jive with the company that you're going to be joining. This would include places like LinkedIn, which is considered more of a professional site for your career exposure, Facebook, Instagram, other social sites. These are things that you want to make sure your privacy settings are set so that what you want to be visible to the public is, and what you may not want to be visible to the public is protected. And again, be authentic. Apply for employers and positions that would be well suited to your online presence as well. Just to encourage you again, taking care of your career, tending your career as if it's an agriculture, a garden, it's going to grow. You got to pay attention to it or it can get away on you. So there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight today. There are certain things you don't have control over. Expect some bad weather during your career. There are going to be environmental things that happen. Consider the environment we're in this month, what has rapidly changed in the month of March of 2020 with the coronavirus and how it is affecting the food industry. Just expect that's going to happen. You're not going to have control over it. So you want to be just preparing yourself, continuing to maintain a positive attitude, and do what you can to better improve yourself and your career and be prepared when the great times come along. Another thing that might happen as far as bad weather in your career, you don't always know what's going to happen with the employer that you've chosen. They may go through some financial difficulties. They may have some rapid expansion. They may lose a large customer. Those are all things that you may not have control over, but they're going to happen. Things like this are going to happen again, and just expect that that's going to come. So one of the things you can control, though, is improving the soil for your career, acquiring the right knowledge. As I had said earlier, taking advantage of every opportunity you have to learn. This might include raising your hand for cross-functional assignments where you learn more about other aspects of the business that you're involved in than the silo that you really prepared for educationally. The next thing I would say is commit to regular weeding as you're tending your career garden. This would involve removing bad habits, things that have shown up on maybe your performance review, or you know it personally about yourself, you've taken some self-evaluation. Take time throughout your career to evaluate where you're at with where you want to be, and what do you need to do personally to improve your habits in order to have the best success. And then you want to take that time to reevaluate your career at different stages, and where are you at in getting towards the big picture goals that you set up at the beginning of your career. But if you take the time to do some of these things, if you bounce back after the bad weather, you're continually acquiring the right knowledge, you're going to really set yourself up for success. I would encourage you at various times in your career to really get outside your comfort zone. There's going to be times when you have a choice to either grow your career or to become stagnant, get very comfortable with what you're doing. And those are times when you may want to seek out an internal promotion. You may want to ask for a new assignment within your organization, or you may need to seek out a job with a different company that's going to keep you in line with the path that you had set before yourself where you wanted to be. So stay current with industry trends. Know what's happening, what's going to keep you marketable in the industry. When you raise your hand for a new assignment, be willing to make mistakes. You aren't going to have all the experience. You haven't been doing it for a long time if you're taking on a new assignment. So there's an opportunity to make mistakes, but get the right mentors in place so that you can bounce ideas off of them. Take that risk. And as we said before, if there are weaknesses that you have had identified to you or self-identified, face those, challenge yourself to improve in those areas. And then really adopt a mentality of, if it's meant to be in my career, it's really up to me. It's not up to my employer, not up to my boss. It's up to me to take my career where I want it to go. So I wanted to provide some very practical, specific interview tips. I'm going to start with those that happen over the phone, and then we'll move into video interviewing and face-to-face interviewing. So I hope these are helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to add them in the Q&A section. Remember when you're doing a phone interview to smile. It'll give kind of raising your voice, your face, it'll put a positive spin on the conversation that you're having with the hiring manager. So remember to smile. Keep a mirror by your table where you're doing your phone interview if needed. Concentrate on your pitch. I think this is important to practice interviewing over the phone. You're gonna be nervous potentially. This is an exciting new job opportunity and you may be nervous throughout the conversation. So really focus on your voice inflections and keeping your pitch at its normal pace. Take a few deep breaths, things like that. But really a practice will help you with this so that you're not high and screechy or something like that. Consider the noise level around you. I know this isn't always possible, but you certainly don't want to be doing a phone interview while you're driving down the road from your car speakerphone or sitting in the noisy cafeteria at the mall. Just consider where you're going to be doing the interview and making sure that the noise level is appropriate so that the hiring manager on the other line is not distracted by the noise around you. I always say consider using a headset, Bluetooth, so that your hands are free. It's a little bit more natural. One of the things to really be aware of is vocal fillers. If you're talking and you tend to say so, like, or you know, or things that just kind of fill the space when you don't know what to say, this is another reason to practice with a friend. They can identify if you use these types of vocal fillers often, and you really have to discipline yourself to remove those and fill the pauses. You know, be fine with pauses, but also fill it with content that you want to make sure this hiring manager knows about you. We always encourage individuals who are interviewing to have notes prepared about your skills that you want to be sure to convey to the hiring manager or examples that you want to have ready, but use them more as notes to jog your memory, not a script that you would read verbatim down the page because you want it to sound more natural. A phone interview is definitely a time to keep it professional. It's not personal. You want to be talking about how your expertise, the skills, the knowledge, the education you've had is going to fit into this employment. It shouldn't be a time for you to dish all the information about your personal life. It's important to also be very focused on the hiring manager on the other end of the line and not multitask, not try to do a couple of things at once. You don't want to be checking your email or playing a game, or whatever it is you might want to do. Don't multitask while you're on that phone interview. Give that phone interview your undivided attention. And then prepare questions in advance that you're going to want to ask your interviewer. It's very disappointing for a hiring manager or HR manager or recruiter on the other end of the line to get to the end of an interview and ask if you have any questions and find out that you don't have any questions. It shows a lack of interest potentially. If this is a place where you want to go to work, there should be some curiosity on your part about how this would be a good fit for you. So be sure to prepare some questions in advance that you can ask the interviewer. Next, I wanted to share some information about video interviewing. This is certainly something that's going to be growing. It has been growing over the last number of years. We've been posting some articles to assist with this for a long time, but in this month, we've seen another significant uptick in virtual interviewing. So one of the key things to know in advance is identify the platform and download the software that's going to be used for your interview, and make sure that this information is given to you enough in advance that you can make sure you have the technology available, whether you're going to do it on your computer or on your mobile phone device. Just make sure you have that software downloaded and ready to go. You don't want to do that 5 minutes before the interview starts. I would also recommend doing a test run, making sure that you know how to operate the technology, it works on your device, and you know where the buttons are, how the controls work. I would recommend that you use a quiet, well-lit space. Similar to the environment I'm in right now, you want to make sure that your face is well-lit. People are going to be able to see you. There's not a ton of distractions around you, and they can get to know you and focus really on what you're saying versus distractions and things behind you. That's another thing to consider, is what will they see? You're going to want to make sure that your posture is appropriate. You're going to want to make sure that you're wearing something that would be business professional, not your pajamas. Also, that the background behind you is not too distracting. There's not too much going on in it. If it is, making sure you have a neutral background behind you that is not going to distract from what you want them to hear about you as a candidate for the position. And then make sure you've positioned your camera so that you can keep good eye contact with the interviewers during the video conference. And then make sure that you know who to contact and at what phone number if for some reason you're unable at the last minute to log in to the video online interview that you had scheduled. It's having that contingency plan so that there's not panic at the last minute, because there is a possibility that something can go wrong on your technology side or theirs, even if you have prepared in advance. So you don't want to lose that time and not have them know that you are engaged and interested. You don't want them to think you just didn't show up for the interview. All right, so then jumping to interviewing tips for a face-to-face conversation with a potential hiring manager. In advance, you're gonna want to prepare some speaking points. Kinsa Group has a number of questions that you can prepare for in advance. But you don't want to walk into an interview and not have recently reviewed some of the key things that you believe are important from your career and how that will apply to that employer. So writing some of these speaking points down is going to be key so that you can draw it to your mind when that question comes along from the hiring manager. You want to be authentic. When you're interviewing for an employment opportunity, you want to make sure it's a good fit for you personally as well as for that employer. So be sure to represent yourself and be authentic to who you are. You don't want to be reading a script. You don't want to have to refer to your notes to read from them verbatim. It'll seem too forced. And if it's your accomplishments, you should be able to speak to them without having to read them verbatim. We call this the PIE principle, P-I-E, to remain positive, to remain interested and engaged. This includes both your body language as well as the words that you're using. You want to speak positively about your past experiences and avoid negatively speaking about your previous places of employment or specific individuals or portions of the industry. Just keep things positive as you're communicating. Show your interest by leaning in for the interview, responding to the questions and the comments that the hiring manager is making, staying engaged with them, having a posture where you lean back, put your feet up, things like that are not interested and engaged. You want to be leaning in for showing your interest in the position. You also definitely want to be prepared for the tell me about yourself question. Kinsa Group has an actual blog article about this that you may want to use, but tell me about yourself is not an opportunity for you to go through your life history and share every personal and professional detail about yourself. It's really an opportunity for you to succinctly say something like, in my case, I would say my name is Laurie Hyllberg and I went to school in Springfield, Missouri at Evangel University, obtained my bachelor's degree in psychology, management, and marketing, began my career in Chicago in human resources, quickly learned that I enjoyed the recruiting side of human resources, so I joined a recruiting company in Franklin, Wisconsin, and I've been there for 20 years. I started as a recruiter, and I was promoted after a couple of years to an account manager, and then for the last 12 years I've been leading our team of 10 recruiters on staff. Something to that effect, where you are summarizing the career that you have, some of the key skills that you have, and maybe ending with a statement of why you would have an interest in the position that this employer has open right now. Again, be ready to talk about some of the key accomplishments that you've had, revenue you've generated, food safety that you have implemented, new products that you have developed, or financial skills that you have displayed, cost savings, things like that. But read your audience. Be aware of if the hiring manager who's asking the questions is engaged with you. Stop talking and ask them if they'd like more detail. Try to keep some of your answers succinct so that if they want more detail, they can ask you to expand on one of the points that you have made. Again, prepare questions for your interview in the face-to-face. They should be different questions than what you shared or had during your phone or video interviews, but show that you've done your homework on the company. You've visited their website. You've tried their product in the restaurant or grocery store, and ask intelligent questions that would make you stand out so that they know why would they want to hire you at the end of this interview process. Why are you the right fit for this company? And then we always encourage our candidates to ask at the end of the interview if there's any remaining questions that employer might have that would keep them from being able to make a hiring decision about you. Ask for the job. Let them know that you are interested in coming to work for them before you leave. And then ask them when you should expect next steps. What is their timing for making a decision? And then let them know if that's going to fit with the timing that you have based on other opportunities that you are interviewing for. If you're further along in your career and you're not a new student graduating, but you may have be looking at new career opportunities, there are some right and wrong reasons for changing jobs, and we just recommend that you look before you leave. You may have outgrown your current position if the responsibilities are really not what you expected them to be, if your passion for the position is gone, if you feel that you're not adequately rewarded by compensation or more responsibility or leadership or training, and if there's no one internally that's an advocate for you and your career growth, there are bound to be times during your career that you're going to feel discontent at an employer or there's a rough patch, but really make sure if you're ready to make a job change that this is really something that you need to do. And the grass always looks greener on the other side. So if you do make that job change and you find out that what you thought was going to be an amazing career opportunity, and all of a sudden it's your worst nightmare, we would encourage you, this is not the first time that's happened, take a deep breath and really take stock of what are the positives about this position that you have accepted. This might be just the first job you accepted out of school and it really wasn't what you thought it would be. Or it may be that you've been in the industry for quite a while and you made a job change and it wasn't what the company represented it to be. So definitely list out the positives and negatives and then determine what of those negatives really needs to change in order for you to stay at this employer in this job. Be real specific about what you need. And then if you worked with a recruiter to get this position, you're going to want to reach out to them and lay out any misconceptions that you had received about the position. If not, you're going to want to talk with your new boss and review why you're dissatisfied with the role that you've accepted and propose some solutions for how it could be a better fit for you. But make that plan and remember, it's always easier to find a job while you still have a job. So look before you leap again. I do have some tips here for working with a recruiter that I'll go through really quickly. One of the reasons Kinsa Group is great for food and beverage industry professionals is that looking for a new position can be challenging and it can be time consuming. So if you use a recruiter, whether it's Kinsa Group or you're working with an internal recruiter at an employer, be honest with them about what you're seeking. Ask them a lot of questions about the company. Provide specific feedback about what is a good fit for you or what may not be a good fit for you. If you hear feedback from an interview that you had with that employer or with that recruiter and they've challenged you to improve some things, really accept that feedback graciously and implement it. Keep in touch. If it's an employer you'd like to work for in the future, but this position is just not the right fit, stay in touch with them. Let them know you'd like to hear about other opportunities in the future. And then as always, refer your talented friends and colleagues, whether it's with a recruiting firm like Kinsa Group or to an employer in the Chicagoland area. It's always good to make referrals. And so here's some information about Kinsa Group and the resources that I referenced today. My name's Laurie Hyllberg. This is my LinkedIn address here. You can certainly connect with me on LinkedIn. And then I've got links to our resume writing tips, more interview tips. Kinsa does also host webinars. Monthly, we have a number of webinars for food and beverage industry job seekers. And you're definitely going to want to check that out if that's something you think might be a resource. And then we have positions posted on kinsa.com that we are recruiting for. And then we also host the Chicagoland Food Career Center. And there's a number of positions there that I know Britt and Andrea will want you to check out as well.
Great. Thank you, Laurie. And we do have a question that came in from one of our attendees. The question was, for resumes, would it be beneficial to include relevant coursework, especially if we do not have work experience or relevant work experience?
That is great. Yes, I would include any relevant coursework specific to your, whether it's food product development, food science, food safety, culinary, any of those key words, because you're going to be able to come up in a resume search with the keywords about the coursework that you did, and it's going to show how. I would include also how much time you spent. Like if it's a lot of courses, maybe it's hours, but definitely include some of the coursework. If your education is your greatest capability for getting you the career that you're looking for.
Great, wonderful. So if there are any other questions that weren't shared during today's webinar, we would encourage you to send them in. You can email them to info@chicagolandfood.org, and we will make sure they get to Laurie over the course of the next day or two and get answers posted to those. We will also be uploading these webinars as well as Laurie's deck that she shared and posting those on our website in a free access area so folks can jump on there and refresh any parts of the webinar as well as look at the deck. Okay, great.
Andrea and Laurie, I do think that there's a question in the chat box
Okay.
that came up. I don't know if you want to grab that. I can read it if you'd like. It's how to answer questions such as, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses.
Yes, that's a good one. So you can still see my screen. We are going to have a specific blog on interview tips that you can reference that will talk about listing out your strengths and weaknesses. So definitely check out this link here for interview tips. But for strengths, I mean, highlight, that's the easy part, right? Highlight what about your skills or education is preparing you for the details of this position. I mean, you don't want your strengths and weaknesses to be totally unrelated to the position that you're interviewing for. So be prepared for that in advance of what from your education or experience, or maybe even your personality, your core makeup, makes you strong for this position. And then when it's weaknesses, I mean, if you're a newer student entering the industry, weaknesses is really just a lack of practical experience over the long haul. That's a good weakness, but identifying that they're the employer that you would like to start your career with and be a part of and learn and gain that experience with is something to highlight. And again, I would reference going back to those interview tips. There's a lot of suggested potential answers to consider in there.
Great. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate it. I put the 2 reference points for additional questions and website on the chat feature for folks to take a peek at. And we really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge, Laurie, and we will hopefully see everyone for the rest of today's webinars. So thanks again.
Yes, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And good luck in your job search.
Thanks.